love that we had made when we were glad. Oh, yeah. I'm coming back. It's 4 a.m., but we all coming back to the bed that we had made when we were glad. Oh, I'm coming back.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Friday night FST Improv Interview. This is Will Luera, Director of Improvisation at Florida Studio Theater. We're once again here with our weekly chat with an improv teacher, director, performer from around the world. We're talking different topics every week regarding the world of improvisation. Now, this is just one of our 5 shows, virtual shows that we are doing every week. As we know on Thursday, most of you know, on Thursday nights we do our all Spanish improv show, Impro Latinx. On Saturday nights at 7 p.m. we go onto Instagram to do our radio call-in show, followed by a private Zoom show at 8 o'clock. Every week it's different. So if you're interested in getting into the private Zoom shows, just let me know and we'll log you in. Tonight, our 8 o'clock show, afterwards is going to be our house party where we're going to feature 3 of our house teams. That'll be a Zoom room show, but it will also be streaming live over Facebook, so you can watch it here as well. It's going to feature 3 of our teams, Busted, Impromptu, and the Early Birds. But first, we have our show here at 7 o'clock, the Improv Interview. As I said before, it's one where we chat with the different thought leaders in improvisation from around the world. And this week, we have our guest is a friend and probably somebody that I've known probably longer than most improvisers in the improv world. I've known this guy for quite a bit. We'll try to get that timeline down once we get him out here. So let's welcome to the Zoom room, Mr. Rick Andrews. Yeah,
Hello.
Rick. Hello. Yeah. So
1999 is I think.
1999. So that's when you started your first improv class you started at Improv Boston.
Yeah. So I was 12. I don't know how old you were. I don't want to put you on blast.
No, it's all right. I was 24.
That's so weird for me to hear because everyone, when you're 12, everyone who's adult is just like, if you're not like an old person, you're just like vaguely an adult. Like you could have been 38 and I would have had no clue.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
This isn't, you are a very tall person. I'm trying to remember if even then, were you already taller than me at the age of 12?
I might have been, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
I apologize. It's very rude of me. I don't know what I was thinking.
I'm trying to place all the details of us.
So I definitely had a growth spurt. So it was weird when I was in second grade. This is what the content people came for. When I was in second grade, I was the second tallest person in my grade, other than Eugene Deladon, the brother of famous women's basketball player Elena Deladon. So that's the tall family, you can imagine, right? Okay. So I was really tall young, and then by I think like maybe middle school, I was back to average of the pack. So I had a big growth spurt beginning of high school. So by the time I left for college, I was definitely taller than you, no doubt. And I probably made you feel bad about it.
No, you didn't. Yeah, I was over it by that point. If
Okay,
we were like if we were the same age, maybe I would have had issues.
You had a lot more power over me though. You were much older, much more responsible. You like ran a theater. It was yeah. You had a lot going for you other than the height.
Now, what got you into improv so young? I mean, you were taking classes with like a bunch of adults.
Yeah. You should take credit for this, I guess. Like I started with a friend of mine. I used to watch old the Whose Lines It Anyway, like British versions. They would show that on Comedy
Mhm.
Central way back in the day, just like reruns. And that's why I knew what improv was. So I really liked that show. And then my dad found some listing for Improv Boston, and
Yeah.
we went down. There were Sunday afternoon shows at one point, I believe.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we were the only people who came. No one else showed up.
Every week.
No, just the one show we went to, the first one.
Oh.
And I can't remember who, but someone came out and was like, we normally cancel the show if there's not 10 people. But I guess I looked really sad. So they were like, well, we'll do the show anyway. So they just did like a private show for my family. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I just could not, like improv just blew, like it just hurt my head. So me and my friend Mike, who was my age as well, just started going back.
Yeah.
Must have just been seeing show after show after show. And Ron Jones, who ran the theater at the time,
Yeah.
at some point was just like, hey, you should take a class. And there were not teen classes. We were in adult classes. Our first class, so the theater was being painted or some fridge was being fixed or something. And so the class was at the Abbey Lounge, which was like a bar down the street.
Yeah.
So he like took us into the back of this bar in like the middle of a Saturday afternoon. But yeah, it was all other adults, which I think because I had Mike there too, like we were probably like little brats. Like we would probably, I think we would like trigger each other's like teenage behaviors. But I definitely like enjoyed, not playing with like other kids.
Yeah.
I don't know. I both was probably really obnoxious and immature, but I also like took improv really seriously. Like I remember I still have like a notebook I made, like you would make a notebook for class. Like this would be like calculus class. Like I had like a binder, and I remember I printed out, people were posting articles on yesand.com, if you remember this.
Yeah. I remember that.
And I printed them out and I like kept them in like a binder. So that I could like read through them. Did
you say you still had it?
I still have it somewhere. Yeah, it's somewhere. I don't think I have it here, but it's in a box somewhere. But it's definitely still out there. And like I took notes, so whatever notes I have from like my very first improv classes are like in that binder.
Now, so this started 12. You were 12. This is 1999. This is 22 years ago, and you now have a career in improv,
which is bananas.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember you were going you moved to New York, and I believe you were going to NYU grad school. Your career was definitely headed in one direction.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they're just, even in 1999. I mean, the idea of doing improv for a career was like a joke. I mean, people would be like, "Yeah, improv, that's where the money is, ha ha ha," and people still say that. So, like. It was just never a thing I actually considered. I was never like, oh, I like do improv. Yeah. That was not, and I don't have a strong interest like in comedy. Like I don't have I don't want to act. I don't have a, I enjoy like good sketch comedy. I enjoy good stand-up, but it wasn't like I wanted to be on TV or in show business. Like I just loved doing improv. So in college, like after college, I applied for grad school in social psychology, which I was also really passionate in, but I only applied for programs in New York or Chicago because I knew I wanted to keep doing lots of improv. Okay. And then when I got to New York, it was kind of like, oh, like people will like hire you to like coach their team. And like that, I didn't even know that was a thing. And it was like people all of a sudden like paying money for me to like show up and like run the rehearsal. And so I quit grad school after a year. And at that point, I think I was coaching like 2 teams. So let's see, how much money did I make a week? I think I got paid $15 an hour. So I was making $60 a week.
Oh, wow.
So what is that? Like $320 a month. So I had some money saved up for like rent. I basically had myself like a 6-month window where I was like, okay, I need to like try to really up the coaching so that I can like pay my bills. And if not, then I'll I think I technically took a leave. So I had the option to go back to grad school. I was being paid to go to grad school. It was like one of those programs. Okay. So but grad school was kind of my job. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna like take this time to like try to do this full time and make this work somehow. And it worked out. I started coaching more and more, and word spread, and eventually I made it onto a team at the Magnet and started teaching maybe 6 months after that. And so once that started happening, it just became more and more regular, and I never really looked back. At no point did I consider going back to grad school.
Well, let me ask you a question. Because I've often talked about how physics crept into the way I ended up teaching improvisation. Like it kind of framed the way I came to understand it. Now, did social psychology do that for you and improv?
Yeah, a little bit. It's funny. I actually think that even though it wasn't my like specialty, the stuff I learned in cognitive psychology classes actually like is stuff that I think about all the time when teaching. Social psychology is kind of like watching how people and situations like affect each other, right? And so some of that comes up, but a lot of it, some of that comes, especially in like managing a classroom and like thinking about like how to get people feeling comfortable and what kinds of an environment to create to get certain behaviors. With cognitive psych though, it literally just the stuff I learned about like memory and like association. I think about all the time when I'm teaching and trying to get people to unlock like creativity. It's so much of it is just like, you know, you said that person said something, it made you think of something, right?
Yeah.
You had a chain of associations and like your mind is literally always trying to make sense of things and creating, and it's just wrestling with that clay. And you can almost kind of watch people skip over their first associations to like go to their next choices. And so it's like, it like put a language to the judgment that I had felt for myself or for other people. And so I often like running just like simple word association games because you can actually like really pinpoint like the moment when someone judges themselves. You can like point to their face and be like, you see that face you just made? They'll be like cat, dog, furf. And you'll just, you see it like on their face and they just like hate themselves for a millisecond.
And so you literally point to their faces. That's what you do.
That's my teaching style, is just me pointing at people and going, haha, and I scream. Yeah, but it definitely psychology and like science, I think, you know, improv is like magical in that sense, but it also helped me like, kind of figure out like why does this stuff happen? How to, because if it's magic, it starts to feel like, well, who knows? You know, it starts to feel like, who knows? Maybe the ghost of Del Close will come and bless us with his magical LSD dust, and we'll do the best Herald ever. But that feels really inconsistent to me. And you watch really great groups, they're not inconsistent. They're like consistently amazing.
Yeah.
And so I think it got me thinking like, what are the things that we're doing mentally? Where is our focus when to make it like consistently good? So that's always been interesting to me, I think, for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you. I love that. The association and pattern recognition, like that, those are two things that like the language behind it, I feel like it's taken me a while it took me a while. I think I've got a pretty good grasp on it now, but it did take me a while to kind of figure that out.
Especially working with teams, I think a lot about priming. Like the most natural callbacks in improv always feel like the callbacks you discover on the fly, where you're just like, you're just remembering a thing. And I remember learning in college, because I'd already been doing improv for a while when I took all these classes. I remember learning about like recency and priming, where it's kind of like you have your long-term memory storage, right? It's not in the back of your head, but I don't know why I point there.
That's right.
It's where your eye stuff is. You know, you have short-term memory, which is like the last like loop of, you know, what just happened. But you know, if you say a word 10 minutes ago, it's kind of like in my brain, it's kind of rattling around there. And if something kind of starts to approach it or feels similar to that, my brain really reaches out and grabs it. Do you ever that thing in a class where you're like, let's get a suggestion of a location, and then two people say the exact same thing?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, whoa. Sometimes you can actually figure out why they did it. Like I've had it where like they both say a word, and then we realize that like a woman in the front row has that word tattooed on her arm. And like she did a scene 6 minutes ago, and we all looked at that word and we didn't really fully process it or even focus on it, but it just like, for some reason I'm thinking of that word right now. Like it's a lot of like, so I think like a lot of callbacks and connections in good improv shows often are that of like, this scene happened earlier. I'm not really consciously focusing on it, but you do something similar and all of a sudden my mind makes the connection because that idea is like really primed and like it's ready to be activated again.
So this is always a big thing, like in free form, always a big thing in free form. Like it's like, we're just going to keep organically going. And then suddenly something kind of comes up, and then we make this. So there's this scene that happened way back here. This thing happened.
Yeah.
Ooh, these two things are very similar, and we bring them together.
I feel like we both have had like complete love affairs with like organic freeform improv, but like not while I knew you, like I think, right? Like you didn't really start doing more of the freeform stuff, I think, until at least when I left or right before it.
You probably caught a little bit of it.
I got so into it in college and like my first couple of years in New York, and developed a show in New York. Yeah. I love that feeling of being in a show, especially if you're doing like Herald after Herald. It's like, there's something kind of cool about a callback where you're like, I see that character, I'm making this connection, and I'm kind of like presenting the idea to the show. But there's something really magical about like all of you together figuring out like what a thing is at the same time with the audience.
Okay, that right there, what you just said, one of my favorite compliments that I've gotten multiple times when performing freeform is that an audience member will say, you did exactly what I was thinking.
Oh yeah.
Even though they didn't know they were thinking it, until that exact moment. Like, it's
Right.
not like they wanted it to happen, but we all thought of it at the same time, us on stage and the audience.
I also have this so there's certain types of writers who I think have this ability to make me feel smarter. Does it make sense? Where someone like elucidates or describes something that I have absolutely noticed or felt or experienced, but I've never been able to consciously put my finger on it, or I haven't like given it the effort to actually describe what it is. But when I read it, I immediately go, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yep.
and it makes me feel really smart, even though all I'm doing is just like living. The actual genius is like this person who took all the, you know, and I feel like there's that way with performing where like you're making all these connections, and to the audience, they're able to make the same connections because they're like not on stage and not like nervous at all. They're just like watching the show. It's so much easier for them to just like be this participant. And I love that feeling of like, I think as a performer, I'm a big believer in like there's some people who are like, you got to still feel some nerves. Otherwise there's no energy in the show. And I am a huge believer in like, you should feel the same level of energy as someone in the crowd who has no stake in this.
Yeah.
Because at least for me, the more relaxed I am, the easier it is to have that exact thing where like, I'm making those connections with the audience too. And we're all having the same assumptions. Because if I'm spending any time focused on, oh shit, is this going well? Are people gonna like this? Then I immediately like can't, it just starts to cloud over.
Yeah.
And I love doing organic stuff because you just don't have any time to get stuck in that. You're just doing it.
Right. Huh. We're gonna need to have like a whole other talk on freeform.
We have like, this is very quickly becoming a podcast series.
Yeah, I mean, because I definitely have a lot of ideas that, of course, that I've developed over the years that would be great to bounce off someone else. But right before we started this though, we got we got sidetracked on freeform. Right before this started, we got sidetracked on something else, and talking about corporate training, and something that you're doing a lot of right now, and I'm finding myself doing quite a bit as well. I've had, I've gotten very busy with it. In fact, next week I have a really big one that's going to be a 4-day long corporate training session.
Ooh.
It's like 6 hours a day for 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
All over Zoom, just like all of us.
Yeah.
Now, before we go into the nitty gritty, because I definitely want to hear about your specific take on corporate training, or what you like to focus on, maybe even a favorite exercise. How's it been teaching it virtually?
It's better and better all the time. Like both as I get more adept with the technology, but also as people get more used to it. I think the first couple just classes and stuff I taught virtually were like, I've been saying this all the time, but like little mini funerals for my old classes where it's just like, I used to do blank, but I can't anymore. And like just mourning it. And it was helpful for me to like give that up and really embrace the technology. And there are things that I do now that I just couldn't do before, like, you know, screen sharing and using the chat and breakout rooms, like just really trying to be really facile with that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I also think people are so desperate to like play and so desperate to connect that it is making, I think it's made a lot of the like initial conversations I have with companies who might be like suspicious of this as like a method for training, just like a lot easier because people are also just crave like the connection and the fun. And I think sometimes with companies, it used to be kind of like, well, why should anyone have any fun at all? This is work. And it's like, oh, that's a really dumb point of view. But now I don't have that much. And people actually really, the like end of year, every year I always do like end of year team building. There's always so much stuff in December where people are like, want to do some end of year thing. And the requests are usually like, hey, we thought it would be kind of wacky and fun to do improv at the end of the year. And I'm like, yeah, that is great. And this year they were like, please send fun. It was so, the like tone of the emails was so much like, you know, because everyone's just been like swimming in this existential crisis all year.
Yeah.
So I think there's a ton of value. There's normally a ton of value in that to me. It's just like connecting as an actual human who has creative thoughts and impulses with people you work with. But I think that's especially valuable right now because a lot of jobs and people are feeling so disconnected from other humans.
Now, is there something that you specifically either focus on or excel in, or do you have like just a bunch of off-the-shelf offerings and you're like, hey, choose one of these?
I think a learning curve for me in terms of just communicating what I do has been, I've learned to really try to start most of those conversations, not by saying what can I do, but like what are people looking for? Because I think improv is a weirdly if you actually describe all the things that improv does for people in terms of the skills, it like, upskills for them.
Yeah.
It sounds like snake oil. Like
Yeah.
it does too many things. It can increase your confidence and also your creativity, and also makes you a better listener, and also makes you more empathetic, and it also makes the team more cohesive, and it makes you a better public speaker. All those things are true, and I do trainings on all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But when you list them all real quick, it just sounds like you don't really train on anything in particular, or it sounds kind of like, I don't know, Tony Robbins-y, too good to be true, just like all schmaltz and no like substance. And so, like I think I do a lot of team building. Is the big bucks like team building and stuff related to that, and then like listening, empathy, like interpersonal stuff. Creativity, brainstorm session, like just unlocking is another stuff. And then I think public speaking, presentation skills, confidence, imposter syndrome, that's like another kind of bucket.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a good one.
Those are the like that's like the color wheel, I think. And a lot of stuff ends up being like mixing and matching depending on depending on the team and what they're looking for. But I'm like a real big believer in like, I think that as you know this as a teacher, I mean, haven't you had students who like, over the course of doing improv for like years have made like unbelievable changes?
Oh yeah.
Like I know people who were like pathologically like pass out nervous and to like talk in front of anyone, and are now like performers. Yeah. And that is really, there's people put a lot of stock in that, and there's a lot of stuff out there that says that it'll make that change. It just doesn't really. And I think improv, because of the environment that it creates, where I have to try my hand, I have to take a stab at it, and it can only come from me. It's got to come from me and my experiences, and then I get to see people be like, "Yeah, we love that. Yeah, we love it so much. We're going to show you what a great idea that was." Right. I think it is such a good confidence building tool, and you build confidence from doing it. And the only way to do it successfully is to be a great listener, to be very supportive, to do all these really pro-social things that like are good for like most jobs. So I think it's a really powerful training tool. Like I think improvisers actually are kind of undersell it a little bit when they talk about it. I mean, it's obviously really fun, but I think in terms of it's really hard to make people more confident. It is really hard to make people better listeners. A lot of what people try to do is like, here's a slideshow on like what you should do to be a better listener, and like that's not going to cut it. So I know I'm a big believer of it in that way, that I think it really does work those skills in a way that is very unique and powerful.
Like I talk a lot about in my corporate training, because I'm more and more, let me sidetrack a little bit and say that I've been embracing more and more recently, and by recently I mean like the last 5 or 6 years, that improv it's very much a team sport, or very much just a sport. Like I think the way it works, your awareness of your surroundings and your control of your and coordination between mental and physical and all of that. And so I talk a lot about in my corporate training. I'm like, what we're doing right now, some of these games might even seem silly, right? But it's just like in a practice, right? We're going to be working certain muscles, right? And then so that when you need to use them in real life, it's going to be a bit more intuitive for you. It's going to be a bit easier for you. I did one recently on just brainstorming and team building. I'm like, right now we're doing something so low stakes, right? We're doing something low stakes in this improv game, but when it's real, you're now going to know what it feels like to get past that hesitation, to get past that nervousness, to just participate and know it's okay if I participate. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, we were at sidetrack story to add on to that sidetrack. So we were at Camp Magnet, which is a thing the Magnet does where we go up to the summer camp in the Catskills, and it's like 80, 100 people, and it's like improv workshops, and you're at this like summer campground before the.
I was supposed to go.
You're supposed to go, and you will eventually, and it'll be great. So there's a pool there, and they have the people who work at the camp are lifeguard the pool while we have like pool time. So there's like 40 improvisers in the pool. And someone just has a ball and they like throw it up in the air, and then someone hits it, and the person who hits it goes 1, and then the next person hits it and goes 2, and it immediately started this thing of like, okay, now everyone has agreed that we are all playing this game where we count how many hits of the ball we can get. And then when the group got a record, there became this kind of ever evolving like dance that everyone in the pool would do, and the lifeguard was like, I was just standing by the side of the pool and he was like, wait, when did you guys learn this? And I was like, most of these people don't even know each other, dude. like this is all mirroring. This is all just like sheer immediate observation. And like, it really like hurt this person's head to be like, you guys have never done this before. I was like, no, I mean, genuinely that person does not know that person. Like this is the first day of camp. Like they probably have never met. Like they're just all improvisers and they're all like really hardwired to like be very responsive to the situation. And it is really very eye-opening, like doing brainstorm sessions like with companies and stuff. After having hung out with a bunch of improvisers, you do realize like how easy that becomes when you spend a lot of time in that mindset, and how tough that can be, I think, for folks who, especially if they're not feeling a lot of psychological safety in the like space that they're in. Just having people be like, say a random word is like an impossible task. If you feel judged, closed off, you don't feel accepted, it doesn't feel like a safe space.
What is man, there's so much also there to unpack. The thought that I got from that camp counselor or the lifeguard was how often I've had shows where the audience, I've had a few shows here in Sarasota, especially as we started to move into more advanced work, where an audience member would come by afterwards legitimately upset or annoyed with us because believing that we did not improvise it.
Oh yeah.
Especially when it's a complicated format, whether it's a short form guessing game or a musical number or some sort of long form, like 30-minute thing, something that's a bit more complicated than just like a 2-minute short form game, right? They do not believe it. And they will get upset with me. They're like, you did not improvise that. Improv is, and they'll be like, improv is when you make it up on the spot. I'm like, we made that up on the spot. They're like, no, you didn't. They would tell us, no, you didn't.
There's no better compliment than like, how much of that did you make up? I remember Lewis and I had a show where he was like playing my grandpa and he sang this like dinosaur song, because I like pimped him in. I was like, sing the dinosaur song. And then he like sang this like 2-minute long. And afterwards, someone had brought their friend to the show and they were like, oh, so the dinosaur song, that was the improv. And then everything else is you just do the same thing every week. And it was like, no, the whole thing. I remember seeing The Reckoning. It was at one of the North Carolina festivals. I was in college. This is years ago. And they got, I think the suggestion was camel, and they became this like camel, like they used their arms and their bodies to like become this camel. And then every scene was like someone peeling off from that position. And then like the head of the camel became like a puppet show. And then every scene, like they organically folded back into the camel, like using some physical thing. And I remember talking to one of them afterwards, be like, how long have you been doing that form? And they're like, oh, we just made that up. We do free organic, like we just do a new form every show. And that's the form we discovered tonight was we're coming in and out of this camel. And it just like hurt my head so much to be like, not only do you improvise all the scenes, but you like immediately recognized collectively as a group, a structure for like organizing and organically rediscovering scenes. Like
that is awesome.
That level of like coordination is like really, it's so so mentally taxing. You do not have the bandwidth to think about anything at all. Like you really have to just be in the moment and let the computer part of your brain like operate. I don't know. I remember Ron Jones used to talk about like, and I don't know how much of this is like, him exaggerating, but he used to claim that he had like stage brain, where like this is going back to me being 12, but I'd be like, oh, I like that part of the show. And he'd be like, I don't remember it. Like this is like literally like right after shows, he'd be like, I don't remember what happened on stage. Like I
know a few people like that. So, and I don't know if they're exaggerating.
Right.
But I mean, I'm pretty good about remembering most moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. There might be a couple things that I'll forget, but I mean, I tend to be pretty in the moment but also being able to recall stuff. But yes, I do know a few people like that. And it's, what do you call it? Stage brain?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. I feel like I weirdly have, so the show that Lewis and I do, we've been doing the last many years, is very like TJ and Dave-esque and very like grounded, and it very much involves like really committing to the reality of what's going on. And if someone, it involves a lot of me actually just really picturing really clearly where I am. And if someone's like, hey, I saw your show like 5 years ago, I can't remember all the things that happened, but if they tell me the location of the show, like, oh, it was the one in the drugstore, I can actually picture my picture of that location. Like, I can picture my image of the drugstore. I'm thinking now of the show we did in Philadelphia two or 3 years ago, where we were like in a Wawa or something. What's the start of the show? Like, I can picture that stage, and I could still go back to that stage and show you where a lot of physical things were.
Isn't that amazing?
But I don't remember a lot of the lines, and I remember like maybe bullet points about the characters, but like that image is still very vivid for a lot of those spaces, which is really weird. Because I do think it
Yeah, there's
requires you
gotta-
to just like set to really feel like you're there. You have to like kind of picture with a kind of, because I'm really like, it's always like I'm combining two places I've been in real life, or it's just like
Yeah.
I'm actually picturing my friend's like childhood bedroom or whatever. Like it becomes very
Yeah.
vivid.
I want to know that there's got to be some a science behind that, whatever that is. What sort of memory
Yeah.
creation and then being able to hold on to
Well,
it.
you have this thing called, so it's called, I think your visual spatial palette, I think is the name of it. So that's
Mhm.
essentially your ability to, like, if I actually picture a triangle right now, you can actually do that with your eyes open while looking at me, right?
Mhm.
You can imagine a triangle kind of overlaid, and you can manipulate that in imaginary space. So I think that's the kind of one of the things that makes improv possible, is that like we can play in an imaginary space. And that's also the way that the audience, one of the reasons I think the audience is more invested in the show is that they are literally making the show in their brain in that way.
Yes.
Like if I'm doing an improv show and I pretend to put a hat on, everyone in the audience is picturing a slightly different hat, and they are feeling, I've given the hat some parameters, but you are filling the hat in with like your experiences and like hats you've seen, you know what I mean? Rather than hat, it's not the hat I'm picturing. You know, I gave it like a width and like I'm doing some stuff to it, but like you're filling it in with your, right? If I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, check out this poster on my dorm room wall, you're gonna what poster did you picture?
Me, Michael
Yeah.
Jordan.
Great. That's different than the poster I'm picturing, right? And before we name it, everyone in the audience is picturing a different thing.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
even when I just say dorm room, everyone is now projecting a dorm room from their life into that space.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the audience is so engaged and so much on the performer's side, because like they're co-writers of the show in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to sidetrack a little bit, and I know we're coming near the end. So many things to talk about, but
I get
on
way
that
too
note-
excited. I apologize.
on that note, regarding like building the reality with the audience, are you in favor of giving more detail or less detail?
I think so. It depends on the type of show. It depends. Yeah, I think it depends on this. So for Lewis and I, where we are trying to play in a hyper realistic way, specificity often means specificity of behavior. So a vague statement might be a more specific way of behaving. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When people speak with hyper specificity, it often makes me feel like they are not actually. If I'm like, "Hey, man, we're such good friends," my immediate response is like, "No, you're not." Like good friends don't walk around saying that they're good friends, right? They might be like something like, "Hey, what's up? What?" You know.
Yeah.
And so I think about the specificity of the behavior in that actual situation. And so some of the most specific moves, sometimes where they are more open-ended, or they don't tell you exactly that level of like someone would describe with every little minute detail,
Mhm.
but it is personal enough that you can picture it and you can situate it. So I think details go a really long way. Like the detail is texture, but detail can come from not just the specifics that come out of your mouth, but the way I touch an object, the way I move in the space, the way I interact with this other person.
Yeah.
And I think improvisers get really obsessed with verbal specificity to the point where it becomes like a way to be witty. And it's also like a way to get a laugh, where it's just kind of like, let me make like a hyper specific choice. Like, let me say like Ford Taurus instead of car.
Mhm.
And at least for me, when I'm trying to be more realistic, I think, what would that person say? Would that person say Ford Taurus, or would they say car? Right? Because you know, if you're my wife, you know what kind of car we have.
Yeah.
But so why would I say Ford Taurus?
But your mechanic might say something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might be like, oh, it's a Ford, it's a Taurus, it's a 2006.
Yeah.
You know, so I think all specificity is situational and behavioral in that way. Yeah, that's my nerdy answer.
and we'll tie it back to our main topic before we finish off.
Oh, we had a main topic? Oh, crap.
I mean, I know, right? Our attempt at a main topic. Specificity in, do you ever cover specificity in corporate training?
A lot of times doing storytelling and brainstorming, I think,
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely get into doing specific, like, you know, if you're trying to paint a story for people, being specific and vivid is super helpful. And I think when coming up with ideas too, it's people are often afraid to be specific when being creative, because the more specific you get, the more there is to criticize. But there's also, the more specific you get, the easier it is to build off of it. So I think that's a huge part of brainstorming and creativity, especially.
Huh. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll talk about very quickly one of my favorite corporate training games, and it's been very good for exposing. Sometimes it'll expose dysfunction. Sometimes it'll expose like team chemistry. A very simple game, Dr. Know-It-All.
Oh yeah.
Right? So just very simple game, right? It's like, build a sentence one word at a time, right? Or sometimes I call it Dr. Know-It-All, sometimes I'll change the name depending on the context. But the reason why I like it a lot is, and I tell my teams, I'm like, okay, there's four types of personalities that make this game work, right? One is that you're going to need somebody to start it all.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to start, right? There's going to be somebody that's going to need to do the small jobs, the
And the thes, the buts.
Yes. Now there's going to be the big idea people, right? The proper nouns and the adjectives, right? And then you're going to need somebody to close it out. Somebody that says this is it. And throughout this game, all of you are going to be exchanging roles, but you're all going to need to play different roles.
That's great.
Right. And then you can always catch when certain people are afraid of especially when like the proper noun or the adjective comes up, and they find a way to kind of move around it by adding another and or another useless word. I'm like, no, you've got an opportunity right there.
Or people's like fear of repeating the same nouns we've already used, which is like, I often run like one word story, and it's like, if the story's about a turtle, we probably want to hear about that turtle like more than once.
Yeah.
And then people feel like they've got to do something so unique and interesting when it's like, support what the group did, right? What does the group need right now? Well, the group needs turtle. A specificity game that came to mind for me is a really great storytelling exercise that I call just boring stories. Basically, I pair everybody off. They have a minute to tell the other person a true story, and I encourage them to think of the most boring true story they can think of. But it has to be true, but just the most mundane, boring, banal thing. And then, so each partner tells one boring story for 1 minute, and then I do many rounds of repeating that same story to the same partner, but you start adding in layers of details. So it's like, okay, repeat the same story, but tell it with as much description of smell as you can. Then as much description of like sights, colors, textures, then sound, then emotion, right? And then people one at a time tell their boring stories in front of the whole group, and they just keep whichever details were the most, salient, and they tell it like it's an interesting story, and they are always super funny and interesting and compelling.
Love
stories.
that.
Someone will tell a story about like the bucket of lint next to their washing machine, but it will be fascinating because they like, you can hear the creak of their stairs in their basement and feel the like weird concrete of their unfinished room, and like how the basement always smells like there's an animal in there, but you can never find the animal. And like, it's just like, you start to realize like, oh man, something being boring is more a state of mind of the listener rather than it's more decision I make beforehand rather than like, oh, this is actually a boring story.
Yeah.
So that's what I like a lot, to like help elucidate how like helpful details are. And
that is awesome.
In bringing out specificity. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you so much for
thank you
chatting.
for being my second improv teacher ever, and teaching me when I was a truly obnoxious child, and I appreciate that.
No. It's been great to see your career grow. It's been great to follow you. It's been great to chat today. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your time and your creativity. And I think we're gonna have to do this again and see which many different ways we wander in one conversation.
I think we're both like too excited about improv to like stay on a single topic. It's like not possible.
And thank you folks for watching. I know that our students really appreciate these, and I'm sure we'll be getting questions next week about some of these, about what we talked about today. So thank you again, Rick. Thank you, everyone. So at 8 o'clock, we do have another show on FST Improv on Facebook. We will be streaming our house party in just a few minutes. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good night.